Joining us right now to talk more about it is Republican Senator Bill Cassidy. He recently wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed that was titled, "We Must Pass the Infrastructure Bill." And Senator, you're not the only person saying that. As somebody who agreed to sign off on a bipartisan infrastructure bill, who went against most of his own party to do that, are you frustrated at this point?
Incredibly frustrated because, by the way, this is a great bill for all Americans, whatever your political party. It does seem like politics are trumping the needs of the American people. So if we can pass this, it's going to be great for our country, create a lot of jobs. And by the way, just to make the distinction, this is not the reconciliation bill, $3.5 trillion. This is the money for infrastructure.
Right. This is the $1.5 billion that has bipartisan support in the Senate. Questions about what happens next. It's kind of gotten tied up with the other part of the spending bill that the Biden administration has put forth. What happens? Is your ability to stand with this? You've been very outspoken about this. You think it's important for your state of Louisiana that we saw in the wake of the hurricane. You think it's important for the rest of the country, too. Is there a loss of momentum? The senators from the Republican Party that signed off on this, are they having second thoughts about it, their support?
There's no second thoughts. It is really good policy. And if you poll the American people and they understand this is not the reconciliation bill, this is about universal access to high-speed internet or more money for roads and bridges, they love this bill. It's all into politics right now. If House Republicans decided to support this bill, they would take away the leverage of the Progressive Caucus.
That's interesting.
Because House Republicans have decided not to, the progressives have an incredible amount of leverage, and they're the ones who are trying to force linkage with the reconciliation bill.
Thank you for being somebody who will actually call out both sides. You're calling out your own party here, saying that they could change this, too. You're right. Politics gets in the way, and these are both parties that are playing politics right now.
It is, and politics are frustrating. Yesterday, I was down in a portion of Louisiana that was hit by Hurricane Ida. There's money in this bill for coastal restoration that would keep these terrible storms from hitting. We can build resilience. When the president came to New Orleans, I spoke to him about the need for hardening the grid because there was so much power outage. And the president said, yes, wouldn't it be great if we could prevent Western forest fires as well by strengthening the grid there. So it's not just my home state of Louisiana. I could go around every region of the country, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and tell you how this bill is going to benefit. And we Republicans have the power to take control of this if House Republicans decide to vote for it, taking leverage away from the progressive wing. We can pass this bill.
So why isn't that argument picking up steam in the House with the House Republicans?
Yeah, so far, I can't speak for their internal deliberations. I can just see what's kind of apparent. By the way, progressives know this, too. It's not just my idea. But progressives will also recognize that their leverage comes from the necessity of their votes to pass it. And they are using that leverage. We Republicans, we can take it back. We just decide to line up and support it, and that takes leverage away from the far left.
Senator Cassidy, this is a situation where the president has now come out and said, look, the infrastructure bill is not going to get passed or brought to the floor in the House until after you hear from the $3.5 trillion bill or whatever that becomes with the human infrastructure side of things that he wants to see happening. You think he's only saying that because of the progressives are holding his feet to the fire, too?
Again, I don't guess other people's motives, but I will say Kyrsten Sinema, by reports I've recently read, said she will not vote for the reconciliation bill until there's a vote for the infrastructure bill.
In the House.
Now, in this internal dynamic, Senator Sinema actually has more leverage than President Biden. And the way it's lined up is that we were given a commitment that there would be a vote on infrastructure before the reconciliation bill. We're just asking people to keep their word.
Why don't we talk a little bit more about what this means? It's not just trouble that comes from the weather or from disasters, natural disasters that happen here. I think if you look at the supply chain issues that our nation is facing right now, there's no clearer picture that's painted of the problems with our infrastructure at this point. There's a massive need for that, and it's a need that we've been ignoring for a long time.
There's $17 billion in here for ports. Now, when we look at the holdup in our ports contributing to the supply chain difficulties and the inflation rate, there's $17 billion to begin to rectify that. There's also $65 billion for freight rail and passenger rail. So to the extent that that is also addressing it. And I've got 2 bridges in Louisiana on I-10, both over Lake Charles and over the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge, that contribute to slowed trucking traffic across the continent. There is $110 billion for roads and bridges in this package, and these 2 bridges have been targeted by my state to be repaired. But I could go to any state and find similar projects that will be benefited from this bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is a win for the American people, and everybody should step up and support it.
This is something that American business has asked for, has lobbied for, has kind of begged for, the building of the infrastructure of the country. It's something the Chamber of Commerce has gotten behind. Why do you think Kevin McCarthy and others in the Republican Party aren't willing to kind of step in? Is this just a case where nobody wants to cooperate with the other side at this point in Washington, no matter what the bill is?
Not being in their internal deliberations, I hesitate. But clearly, the American people are perceiving it that way. The American people are perceiving that their needs are being put behind politics, and they actually want these jobs. By the way, I think it's estimated off the top of my head 2 million jobs, and not for folks who make their living by Zoom, but for folks who do construction and manufacturing and service industry and produce oil and gas, help our refineries get the gasoline and the diesel for these tractors and trucks. Those are the people that will benefit. And one more thing to say, Wharton School of Business says that over 30 years, in a 30-year analysis, because it takes time to build infrastructure and there's a payoff over decades, that this will increase GDP and decrease the debt because of increased economic activity. This is something Republicans should support.
What are your thoughts just in terms of the odds of this getting passed with the new deadline being October 31st? That's just a couple weeks from now.
You know, if I knew that, I'd be at the track right now, laying down my bet. On the other hand, at some point, you got to trust that good policy is good politics, and that the American people want something done. I was at a town hall, a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Alexandria, Louisiana. And a fellow from Avoyelles Parish, a rural parish, good parish, but the population kind of declining, talking about how his daughters wanted to move back to Avoyelles Parish, but they wanted to have high-speed internet. And he saw this bill as an avenue to get that infrastructure. And he put it very, very kind of multi-layer. He said, broadband internet, if you build it, they will come. He could have been talking about his daughters, but he certainly could have been talking about a distribution site and the jobs that come with that distribution site and the sort of virtuous cycle that then leads to economic expansion for areas that have been left behind. Good policy is good politics. If you represent an area underserved by high-speed internet, this bill should be for you.
Senator Cassidy, I imagine the bill is probably popular back in your home state, but you're supporting it, the bipartisan aspect of it. Does that make you unpopular in Washington? What do you hear from your colleagues?
You know, when I lay my head down at night, I don't really think about my popularity or unpopularity in Washington. I think about whether or not I am doing something to represent my state and the people of the United States. This bill makes our economy stronger. It positions us to compete globally, economically better. And it brings those folks who have been left behind by the new economy into the new economy, giving them economic hope for themselves, their children, their grandchildren. Now, I can go to sleep and sleep very soundly if I know I'm doing that.
Hope people in Washington are listening to you. Thank you, Senator Cassidy.